Hey there, so you want to know about yeast? I totally get it. Yeast is this magical powerhouse in the baking world, but it seems kind of mystical too. That's why I created this mini series to talk about this microscopic miracle worker. So let's jump right in. The first part in this series, we're just going to talk about some yeast facts. All right, so what even is yeast? Yeast is truly fascinating. It's a microorganism, which means it's a tiny living thing that you can't see without a microscope. Like specifically, yeast belongs to the fungi family, a group of organisms that includes mushrooms and molds. Fungi are like nature's recycling crew. They break stuff down like leaves and logs, turning them into soil. And guess what? Yeast does a similar job. It breaks down sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide, which is why it's used in brewing alcohol and in baking. It's incredible like how such a tiny creature can have such a big impact on things we eat and drink. All right, now our next question, how was yeast discovered? I'd say the story of yeast goes way back into ancient times when our ancestors stumbled upon the amazing power of fermentation. So picture this, they're mixing together crushed grapes or grains, and then suddenly the mixture starts bubbling and making alcohol. That's fermentation in action. Our ancestors probably saw this natural process as like something super magical and mysterious. And little did they know, they were witnessing yeast at work, turning sugars into alcohol and creating something entirely new. All right, now where is yeast found? Yeast is practically everywhere. You can find it floating around in the air, hanging out on skins of fruits, and sometimes even chilling on animals. It especially loves damp places where there's sugary stuff around, like the inside of a ripe fruit or the surface of something sweet. That's why you'll often find yeast happily thriving in environments where there's plenty of moisture and sugar to feed on. All right, next question. How do they make yeast? Making yeast is a really interesting process. Yeast used for commercial production is often a specific strain, such as Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Wow, try saying that. Probably why I don't talk a ton of science stuff. I can't pronounce it. Anyways, this specific strain is used in commercial production. It's chosen because of its ability to produce consistent results. It starts with a tiny yeast cell, which is grown and multiplied in a special environment. This can be done in a lab or in a large-scale fermentation tank. The yeast cells are given nutrients like sugars and minerals to help them grow and to thrive. As they multiply, they produce more yeast cells, which can then be harvested and once processed, used in baking, brewing, and other applications. It's like cultivating a microscopic garden. Okay, here's another question. What kinds of yeast are there? There are several types of yeast out there, each with its own unique characteristics and uses. But the most common type used in baking is known as baker's yeast, which comes in two main forms. There's active dry yeast and instant yeast. Active dry yeast needs to be dissolved in water before using to be activated, while instant yeast can be mixed directly into the dough. All right, then there's brewer's yeast, which is used in brewing beer and making wine. And let's not forget about nutritional yeast. That's a deactivated form of yeast, which is often used as a flavoring or a nutritional supplement. All right, with so many varieties to choose from, it seems like there's a yeast for every occasion. How is yeast used? People have been using yeast for ages, and it's not just for baking. Sure, yeast helps dough rise and makes bread fluffy, but its talents go way beyond the kitchen. We use yeast in cooking, brewing, and even medicine. It's a multitasking marvel. Besides fermenting things to make tasty treats and drinks, yeast also adds interesting flavors to foods. And my favorite and really only way I know how to use yeast is how yeast is used in baking. Now, baking. This is where yeast truly shines, in my opinion. When we bake, yeast does its magic by helping dough grow and get all puffy. Let's just talk about how it works. Yeast munches on sugars in the dough and releases tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide gas. But these bubbles get trapped in the dough, causing it to rise and expand. And the result? Bread and rolls that are soft, fluffy, and oh so delicious, right? Plus, yeast adds a super good taste and smell to baked treats, making them even more irresistible. So, in summary, yeast is this tiny powerhouse with a big impact. From making bread rise to brewing beer, yeast plays a starring role in many of our favorite foods and drinks. So next time you enjoy a slice of bread, take a moment to appreciate the amazing yeast that made it all possible. It's truly a microscopic miracle worker.